at the end, I feel I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Like I feel alive again because I was like dead or prison. I am in prison. So now I feel free to do and to go anywhere I want.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on the third and last episode of Unblock My ID, Unlock My Life, a podcast series developed by the Statelessness Unit of Lawyers for Human Rights. My name is Chipo Hansengule, and I will act as your narrator for this series. In our previous episode, we delved into the profound impact of ID blocking on individuals and their families, exploring the narratives of David and Andries Mabunda and Anais Chuma. We aim to illustrate the widespread consequences that a blocked ID can inflict on daily life, hindering essential tasks such as registering children's births, accessing employment, SASSA grants, banking services, and more. The block on your ID number or documents not only strains your finances, but also takes a toll on mental health and future prospects, extending these effects to your children who are seeking proper documentation for educational and employment opportunities. Essentially, a blocked ID represents a violation of the right to human dignity, transcending legal implications to fundamentally erode self-worth and identity. As we confront the harsh reality of statelessness and being unrecognized by one's own country, we recognize the profound link between identity and basic rights, emphasizing the urgent need for systemic change. In this concluding episode, we shift our focus to envision what systemic change could entail. We will closely examine the process of attempting to unblock an ID through the Department of Home Affairs, explore the lingering effects even after the ID is unblocked, delve into the efforts of civil society organizations and advocates striving to halt this detrimental practice, and conclude with a powerful call to hold the Department of Home Affairs accountable. We are joined by Thulisiwe Gumede, whose ID was blocked in 2018, only getting unblocked in 2022. She will guide us through the arduous and prolonged journey she had to undertake to simply unblock her ID. She will shed a light on the lasting impact the ID block continues to have on the family even to this day. Adding valuable insights to the conversation, we have Thandeka Chauke, the project manager of the Lawyers for Human Rights Statelessness Unit, Liesl Muller from the University of Pretoria Center for Child Law, and Lithalethemba Stawyi, the manager of the Impact Litigation Unit at LegalWise South Africa. They will share the efforts their organizations have been making to combat and bring an end to the troubling practice of ID blocking. Thulisiwe was born in 1976 to two South African parents. She dedicated herself to building a life of financial independence and educational achievement. Moving from KwaZulu-Natal to Johannesburg, she pursued her teaching degree while supporting her children. Unfortunately, her journey took an unexpected turn in 2018 when she visited Home Affairs to help her son to apply for an ID. To her shock, she was informed that her son could not be helped because her own ID was blocked. The Department of Home Affairs claimed that Thulisiwe was a Zimbabwean citizen due to her travels to Zimbabwe with her children to visit her husband's family. This suspicion persisted despite her being born to South African parents. To prove her citizenship, she had to submit an array of documents such as birth records, school letters, and her parents' documents. Additionally, she underwent a costly DNA test with her African mother to validate her citizenship. The prolonged and confusing nature of this process was exacerbated by the disorganization and inadequate communication from Home Affairs. While her own ID was eventually unblocked in February 2022, after 5 years of hardship, the same cannot be said for her 3 children. The Department of Home Affairs directed her back to Lawyers for Human Rights and insisted on a new investigation for her children's IDs. This process was further complicated by the delay in obtaining proof of birth for one of her children, born in a hospital in KwaZulu-Natal. The financial strain of traveling from Gauteng to KZN compounded her difficulties. As a result, their IDs were only unblocked in February 2023. Thulisiwe's struggle to unblock her ID inflicted significant hardship, deferring her dreams and disrupting plans to build a home for herself and her mother. The inefficiencies within home affairs caused emotional and financial strain, profoundly affecting her family.
My first time working, all these years I was just ngizama nje empilweni ukuthi ngiphile nomndeni wami. And remember my background, I'm coming from a disadvantaged home where there is no father figure. My mother was also working opongolo with nothing. We have no house, nothing. So, one, I couldn't get money from loans from banks. And then, because my priority was to build my mother's house, so that whenever, because I'm no longer staying with her, at least when I'm here, she is in KZN. I know when it's raining, she is not affected, but I couldn't even do that. Actually, also the second, my intention was to buy my own house, not to rent with these children. Remember, I told you I have 6 children. So these children need a home. For me to work so much all these years was to uplift my life. So seeing myself working but not able to do things that I want to do for my my family, myself, further my studies, do this, and this thing of ID stopped me from doing anything. Anything that you might think of daily life it was a nightmare.
Thulisiwe's son serves as another illustration of deferred dreams. Hindered by the block on his mother's ID and on his own, he shares similarities with Andries from the previous episode by being unable to gain proper documentation. The lack of an ID prevented him from furthering his education or seeking employment to support himself and his family. Despite the recent unblocking of his and his mother's ID, the impact lingers, having taken place during crucial developmental years. At the pivotal age of 18, when typically young South Africans explore their newfound independence, home affairs essentially halted his progress, resulting in the loss of valuable time for personal growth and development.
He is already 24 years, of which he able to apply his ID this year. Think of these children, they finish the school around 18 years. From 18 years old, let me count from 16 years to 24 years. What is he doing during these years? Where do we put his life? If each and every day I have to encourage them to say, I am trying. Please bear with me. I am trying. Each and every day you have to encourage them. They are still young. They give up easily. It's easy for them to give up. So I had to encourage them with the family. Please wait. Your ID will be unblocked.
Apart from the tangible effects the blocks had on their lives and future, Thulisiwe's family had to contend with a profound impact on their sense of identity. While the block on Thulisiwe's ID reinforced her unwavering belief in her South African identity, her children faced a more confusing journey, consistently questioning their position in the world and their entitlement to South African citizenship. This internal struggle persisted despite their clear status as South African citizens under the Citizenship Act.
I think this affected me a lot. Not I think, it affected me a lot. My family, my children. They started to suspect that we are not South Africans. As when we went there in Vereeniging Home Affairs offices, they sent me to migration offices. which means this was related, the blocking of ID was related with my visiting to Zimbabwe. So my children was asking me if are we South Africans. Then if your children start to ask questions about yourself, you start to think of these children doesn't trust me as a mother, of where are they coming from. So it was like I'm lying to my children, of which I was not lying.
With their IDs now unblocked, Thulisiwe and her family have a chance to pursue an unlocked life. However, fear remains. Thulisiwe is still concerned about the potential repercussions when traveling to Zimbabwe to visit her husband.
At the end, I feel I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Like I feel alive again, because I was like dead or prison. I am in prison. So now I feel free to do and to go anywhere I want. Even though now I am so scared of crossing the border, because I did not understand why they blocked my ID, of which my husband is coming from Zimbabwe. My children need to have that sense of belonging, but of which now I'm so scared of taking them to visit Zimbabwe, because I know I'll be in trouble again. So I don't want to see myself in trouble. Of which this raised something in my mind to say, why some other people coming from neighboring countries are allowed to enter our country, while we cannot date with them. Because we are, at the end of the day, we are human. I feel Home Affairs is failing South Africans. They don't even think of our right. They don't see a human behind the ID. That human or that person behind the ID has life. I feel that Home Affairs is failing us as South Africans. I think, I don't know if maybe I can, I think if my wish is to see them standing up for this and try to resolve. Yes, I'm not against their investigations and all those things, but if they can speed up the process, because thinking of people behind the ID, that should be better. Because like, if you have no ID, you have nothing. You are nothing, actually.
Thulisiwe's journey, like all the other clients we've discussed in the series, vividly illustrates the ways in which lives are derailed by the practice of ID blocking. The process, based on the suspicions that often lack merit in South African citizenship law, denies individuals access to the inherent rights of South African citizens. The long delays and absence of administrative justice compound the immediate and widespread effects, reaching into all facets of life, deeply impacting family members. As we've seen, the ramifications linger, holding lives in the prison, as Thulisiwe says. The success stories of individuals like George and Thulisiwe are not reflective of the broader reality. Many others remain trapped in the labyrinth of blocked IDs with little hope of resolution. As Thulisiwe highlighted, the lack of assistance or guidance from Home Affairs forces individuals to seek help from external bodies. Given the vulnerable financial positions of most affected individuals, NGOs providing free legal advice become crucial lifelines. However, these organizations face a daunting task. They grapple with a multitude of cases, each requiring individual attention without clear guidance from Home Affairs on the criteria, process, or context for unblocking IDs. This lack of transparency exacerbates the challenges, preventing NGOs from providing resolutions. Thandeka will shine a light on Lawyers for Human Rights efforts to navigate this complex landscape.
Lawyers for Human Rights, we've been dealing with cases of blocked IDs as far back as 2011 or 2013 when the Statelessness Project was formed, and we were getting a number of queries related to this phenomenon of a blocked ID. And what we had picked up there is that it seemed to be an administrative process that the Department of Home Affairs was following in order to investigate cases of alleged fraud or misrepresentation. And often when the people would come to us, you'd realize that this person has discovered that their ID is blocked or marked because they are trying to access another service using their ID document. So whether it's withdrawing money from the bank, it's renewing your driver's license, applying for a new passport, applying for a smart card ID, and then you'd be told the ID is blocked. And then what follows from there is a mystery, really, because people would not be told exactly what this blocking means and why it is happening and how you resolve it. And over the years, we noted these cases just kept growing and growing because it also became increasingly difficult to resolve them with the Department of Home Affairs. So initially, we'd write letters to engage the department. From the point of law, we would, pose to them questions around administrative justice to say, listen, you have taken a decision to block this person's ID. What does it mean, firstly? Have you given this person notice before you made this decision to block the ID? Have you given them an opportunity to come and explain what you're picking up in your system if you've picked up something irregular? Can you give us reasons in writing why this is happening? In some instances, they would then respond and unblock the ID or rectify the case. But increasingly, they stopped being responsive to these letters. What was also key in what we picked up is that they would not explain the legal basis of this ID blocking. Because we would say if this is an administrative decision that the Department of Home Affairs is taking on action, it needs to be based in law. And we could not see anywhere in the Immigration Act, in the Identification Act, in the Citizenship Act, we could not see in any law where it speaks about blocking or marking an ID document. And so then the question of lawfulness then came about. And our position is that ID blocking is unlawful. It is unfair because they also fail to follow processes that are prescribed by PAJA to say give the person notice, give them the right to challenge the decision, etc. But it's also very unjust because in some of these cases would see that the decision to block the ID is actually based on prejudice and discrimination. We had cases where clients would inform you that someone looked at the inoculation mark on my shoulder and they decided I'm from Eswatini, I'm not South African. Someone would look at my name and say this is not a South African sounding name, this is a name from Mozambique. Someone would say that the mere fact that I'm married to someone who's not South African, I am also now suspected to be a non-citizen, or the fact that I have a parent who is South African and one who is not. And on that basis, they have now stripped me of my identity documents and along with that, declaring me to be an illegal immigrant and therefore not recognizing me anymore as South African. So there was that element of discrimination and then the immense prejudice that these people would face in terms of resolving the case, but also just how it impacts on your day-to-day life. As Thuli has explained, when you do not have an ID, you do not have a life in South Africa. There's no meaning to your life because you can't access the very basic things. The ability to work for your family, the ability to take care of your children, to access education and to pursue your dreams. So that is the basis of the case.
The challenges become even more pronounced when dealing with children. In some cases, the clients seeking advice are children or youth attempting to acquire birth certificates and IDs, only to be stopped by a blocked ID. Unfortunately, Home Affairs often fails to recognize and address the unique problems these children encounter. There's a crucial need to secure the documentation at a young age to prevent potential statelessness in the future. However, Home Affairs offers little more than advising them to unblock their parents' IDs, leaving them reliant on their parents' struggles. Liesl underscores these unique issues that the Center for Child Law and the Children's Institute attempt to address.
In our work at the Center for Child Law, but also at the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town, we also came across these cases. And what basically happens to children is that they are treated like just an extension of a parent. So if a parent's status is being questioned, the child's status is just put on hold, right? And so our main objection, our main point of law that we wanted to bring across to the court is the fact that the child is a separate human being. You know, you can't just string along a child and punish them for something happening with the parent. And so this is a legal principle that we put in our constitution. The Constitution of South Africa says that children are individual human beings who have their own rights and who cannot be punished for the sins of the fathers. Now, we don't believe that these parents, like Thulisiwe, did anything wrong anyway. But what we were saying is that whatever is going on with her status should not affect her children automatically. And so the Constitution also tells us that children have the right to be registered at birth. They have the right to a name and a nationality from birth. They have the right to have their best interest considered paramount. And throughout our law, we have developed this principle that when you do anything that affects the child, you are supposed to consider how it will affect the child and how you can minimize the risk for that child to be badly affected. In the cases that we included in our papers, you could very clearly see that children were automatically affected. Their births were not registered. They could not get their IDs. Some of them, their own IDs were blocked. But there was never an investigation into the individual case of the child. And so that is clearly a violation of the law. And so, I mean, the point of this whole exercise is that when in 1994, when we voted in a new government, we came up with a constitution, and the point of the constitution was to make a very a sharp turn away from the past, where it was very easy to do a lot of things in secrecy without giving reasons, not giving people enough information to defend themselves. So the South African Constitution is very clear that you have the right to administrative justice, and it's one of the biggest changes from the past, that now when government decides to do something to you, they have to tell you what they've decided. Why have they decided that? How can you help? How can you help yourself? You know, how can you give them feedback? How can they give you feedback? And then also, how do you appeal? And that is basically the civil law equivalent of what happens in criminal law. If you are accused of a crime, you are innocent until proven guilty. So what government does wrong in this case is that once they have a suspicion, they already punish you, and then they try to investigate. But as we see, these investigations actually do not take place unless a person like Thulisiwe is very persistent. So there is no administrative justice. What should be happening is that ID must not be blocked until an investigation is finalized, and then only, and the appeal has been, the person has had an opportunity to appeal. And only then can you start thinking about the children. Because in South Africa, citizenship passes from the parent to the child. Amongst other ways, there are also other ways to get citizenship, but it's one of the main ones. So once you've come to the end of a parent's process and you have found that the parent is not a citizen, only then can you individually look at the child's case. And then you might find that the child has a South African father. So you don't have to do anything because the child is a South African through their father. So now you have punished a mother, 6 children, in some of these cases, 3 generations of people without even doing your homework. It's unconstitutional. Nothing in our law allows it. And the Constitution says that where you are doing something that limits the human rights of people, there must be a law which allows it. And that law must be reasonable and rational, and it mustn't hurt people more than is absolutely necessary. And what you see in the case of blocked IDs is that they go far beyond what is necessary for the aim that they're trying to achieve, which is to make sure that there's no fraud. And so it's irrational and it's unreasonable and it's unconstitutional and there's nothing to defend it.
Even if a client has the financial means to hire a lawyer, they still encounter the same challenges. As Lithalethemba shares the hurdles faced by LegalWise South Africa, who have paying members, it becomes evident that addressing this issue on an individual basis is ineffective. The sheer volume of cases, the profound impact on individuals, and the blatant disregard for the rule of law highlights the need for a more substantial and collective effort to tackle this pervasive problem.
I guess the stance we're taking with blocked IDs is the fact that it's not necessarily based in law. One of the issues that arises when a person's ID is blocked, as Thulisiwe has mentioned, is how long it takes for you to actually prove your identity. And I think the one thing that we forget is that our ID as citizens is everything. It allows you to be able to maneuver yourself as a human being in South Africa. So when that is blocked, you can't do anything. She was even mentioning the part of almost losing her job. We have a member who actually lost their job because of this. And it's because he lost his ID, and when he wanted to apply for a new one, he was told that his ID is blocked. And now the process of not having an ID, but then also realizing that your ID is blocked, you can't do anything. He couldn't take his children to school. He could not work anymore. He can't even apply for SASSA because he doesn't have any way of verifying his identity. So his entire life actually froze for about 10 years.
In December 2022, Lawyers for Human Rights launched a legal action against the Department of Home Affairs. This legal challenge, initiated on behalf of over 100 clients, aims to contest the department's practice of ID blocking. LegalWise later intervened in 2023, and the Children's Institute, represented by the Center for Child Law, was admitted as a friend of the court during the proceedings. Our primary objective is to contend that ID blocking is unconstitutional and invalid, violating multiple constitutional rights, including Section 20 of the Constitution, which stipulates that no citizen may be deprived of citizenship. We assert that ID blocking must end. If the Department of Home Affairs harbors suspicions about individual citizenship, they should notify the individual and allow them to present themselves at the local office for representation. The department must then conduct the investigation promptly and provide the individual with written reasons if they still wish to block the ID, citing the legal basis. This process should include a way to internally appeal the block and provide the individual an opportunity to pursue a judicial review of this administrative decision if necessary. Throughout our legal proceedings, we encountered numerous delays from the Department of Home Affairs. These delays range from requests for postponements to the submission of court documents arriving late, prolonging the matter. On September 20, 2023, we finally appeared in the Pretoria High Court to present our case. During their arguments, Home Affairs conceded that they have no legal basis to block IDs. However, they insisted that such measures were still necessary to prevent identity theft and fraud. They dismissed any notion that the process significantly affected individuals and their families, refusing to acknowledge any administrative shortcomings on their part. Instead, they placed the blame on affected individuals for the delays in their cases. Despite presenting evidence of the constant follow-ups and the efforts people made to engage with Home Affairs, often encountering overworked, irresponsible, and sometimes discriminatory officials, as well as the evidence of the widespread effects on individuals and families, including children, they refused to accept responsibility. Following the court proceedings, the Minister of Home Affairs conducted multiple interviews to explain this stance. We will play an interview he had with ENCA on September 21, 2023.
According to the NGOs and friends of the court that have taken you, or the department rather, to court for blocked IDs, we know that statistically the department has said that about 1.8 million blocked IDs were unblocked since May this year. And the NGOs are of the view that this happened because of their lawsuit against the department. What's your response?
No, they may say so because it makes them feel very good. But if you check our records, and we do have them, we've been discussing this issue for the past 2 years for the simple reason that the process or the act of blocking IDs is not provided for in the act because the act is very silent. But the process sometimes is necessary. So we've been battling with it, and we agreed that we have to unblock IDs. But unfortunately, Marcel, we are still unable to unblock all of them, especially those which fall under 6 categories. So it's not a policy or principle that we have done so, but we are forced by circumstances, which I would like to explain to you if you give me just 2 minutes. Can I go on?
Sure, Minister.
Yeah, firstly, when you meet somebody who's clearly an illegal immigrant and they purport to be having a South African ID, you have got to block it because you don't know what they are going to do with it until you investigate and ascertain yourself that indeed they are not illegal immigrants, because they might have acquired it fraudulently with this corruption that sometimes is happening within Home Affairs. Then there is an issue of duplicates. There are people, Marcelo, especially in our African tradition, who are named after somebody. They've got very identical names and surnames and everything. And sometimes it confuses Home Affairs officials. I'm not blaming those clients, but I've seen sometimes it confuses Home Affairs officials, and they give an identical ID to the same person. Or you find the same person, I mean, 2 people sharing the same ID because they share everything in terms of their names. Or one person having multiple IDs for one reason or the other. In that case, we flag them. It's not really blocking. We flag them. We tag them so that when the person appears, they can immediately come to Home Affairs and we correct this. For instance, those who have got duplicate IDs, they won't have duplicate fingerprints. So we just have to bring them in, check their fingerprints and separate them. And that's why we really tag them. Then we have got people, about 7,000 of them, who are from
the
Namibia.
Issue.
When South Africa, yes, the Namibia issue, because we agreed with Namibia that we send their records of people, because we gave them a choice, by the way. Remember, Namibians were part of South Africa. When Namibia became a different country, we gave them a choice to either take Namibian citizenship or remain with South African citizenship. There are those who have decided to keep both, and we have just discovered that they are getting benefits in both countries as citizens of both. Fortunately, there are 7,000. When we come across them, we take them so that they can come and we correct the issue. They must make one choice. They can't have both. And the majority of this block, which now amount to 702,000, about 500 are this duplicate. And it's very easy to solve them when people come in.
Yeah.
The fourth, yes, are bigamists, where you find a person married to 2 different people using different names. And it's done mostly by men. Yes, and then we flag it so that we come and deal with this bigamy issue. Then there are people who are under investigation by the counter-corruption unit of the department. And we take them so that the counter-corruption unit can see that they are investigating. This is the person who are investigating, and the matter has not been resolved. Then the others are those who are South Africans overseas. They have applied for South African documentation, but they brought incomplete documents. And the embassy start querying us. And so we also take them to show that this person is staying overseas, is a South African, but has not yet given us enough information for us to give them documentation. We take them until they bring such information.
All right, Minister, I just want to ask about 2 of those categories. Firstly, the South African-Namibia issue. Namibia got independence from South Africa on the 21st of March, 1990. What's taken so long? Is the problem with us or with Namibia, or is the problem that we're not finding these people who are now benefiting from both countries? And if that's a yes, how do we know they're benefiting from one country? And then secondly, the duplicate ID numbers. Isn't that a Home Affairs mistake? If it is, why are people suffering because of a Home Affairs mistake?
Well, let me start with the latter. I don't know why you call it suffering. It's a mistake.
Because if you don't have an ID, you can't move on with your life. You can't get a job. You can't apply for things. If you're in matric, for instance, you can't even be resulted.
Yeah, but if you want to do all those things, if your ID is tagged, then they will immediately tell you that go to Home Affairs immediately. The taking is a call that, please, there's a mistake on your ID, come. It's not a punishment. Come, let's correct the mistake. I mean, what makes it so difficult, Marcelo, that we make it a big issue of punishment? We are just saying, please come. For instance, those who usually use banks, they come quickly because the bank will send them. The problem is those, Marcelo, who, when they took an ID, gave us an address which no longer exists and we can't trace them, and they don't find any use for their ID. They don't go to a bank, they don't go to SASSA, they don't go to school, clinic, or anywhere. But those who will go to those institutions will discover immediately when they arrive that there's something wrong, and they come to Home Affairs, we correct. So I'm not sure why it's called a punishment, because we can't live with a mistake when we know it's a mistake and not correct it.
And the Namibia issue, I'll come to the mistake part, Minister, in terms of the arguments of what the organizations are saying. But the Namibia part, is the issue with us, with them, or not being able to trace these 7,000 odd people?
Well, if they don't appear, they don't appear anywhere, it's with them, because we want them to come and make a choice. It means they never made a choice. And we don't want to take away their identity without them making a choice. And as long as they don't appear within Home Affairs, we do have a problem.
And that's why you flag it, okay? And you do explain that even though it's nothing that is provided in the actual act, it's something that we have to do, especially with the problems that we have in South Africa. Just very lastly, Minister, the organizations that have taken the department to court, we've spoken to them, and they're saying that they've heard you say that it's quite an easy process. You just go to a Home Affairs department and you provide proof in terms of whether your ID was flagged, etc. And the Home Affairs department can just take your, as you're explaining now, your fingerprints, everything, and it's something that is sorted. They're saying that there's ask from Home Affairs officials that is sometimes, impossible. Some of them are saying that, for instance, they are asked to provide their parents' IDs, and they don't have IDs because their parents didn't have IDs, and maybe their parents, can't provide them with that. What do we do in situations like that, if they do exist indeed?
Well, they exist every day, even for those whose IDs haven't been blocked, Marcelo. You do get people who are above the age of 15 who don't have any identification. So it's not about blocking. They simply don't have any identification and they want it. And we have to start getting parental IDs and all that. In that case, we even involve social workers. We bring social workers in. We search in clinics, we search in hospitals in order to correct that. So maybe when they say it's a tedious process, it's because we might be forced to go and search for records elsewhere. And maybe that's why it may take time. Now, when you say NGO says, we are saying it's just as easy as that. We wanted to unblock all these 702 when we did the 1.8 million, Marcel. But the banks want us. They really paid, and they've even written an affidavit in support. They've done a calculation that if we just unblock without finding out exactly who are these people and what are they all about, if they've got bank accounts, the banks have calculated that they can lose as much as 17 billion rand if we just rush in. And so we are being rational to check that when you unblock, everything has been checked. So it's not that we are being malicious or careless, we don't know what we are doing. And I'm wondering why the NGOs which are complaining don't actually think of the interests of the country. Time and again, they think of individual interests when they are broader interests of the country. If we become careless and the banks lose that much money, it affects the whole economy of the country. And I'm sure you'll agree with me on that.
I agree, Minister, but I think at the same time, these NGOs are sometimes approached by people who are not being malicious as well, the same way you're explaining that the department is not being malicious. And those people probably feel as though their pleas fall on deaf ears when they go to Home Affairs departments, and that's why they ask for assistance from these NGOs.
Examining Thulisiwe's case, the Home Affairs arguments provide little encouragement. Despite the Home Affairs claim of unblocking 1.8 million IDs in a few months in response to the Lawyers for Human Rights legal action, Thulisiwe's ID remained blocked for 5 years, despite her clear entitlement to South African citizenship with her South African mother.
While he was responding, I picked up that he might have not have fully information about his department. That I'm sure of, because I've gone through this journey of resolving of my ID that was blocked. So for me, to hear, it's hurting to hear that 1.8 million blocked ID has been unblocked within a short period of time, while mine, it was me alone, took about 5 years. So I fail to understand his response to this. And to say, I heard him saying these organizations are taking the Department of Home Affairs to court to feel good. Did he think of South African people? That's my question. Did he think of South African people? If it is easy like that to go to Home Affairs, I went to Home Affairs. Actually, I got the information about my ID that is blocked from Home Affairs. When I visited Home Affairs, no one informed me. I was blank. I did not know my ID is blocked. I find out when I was going to Home Affairs, and the Home Affairs did not help me at all at that time. And if it takes like a few minutes to unblock the ID, what stopped them? I had my, for an instant, I have this stamp here to say I am South African. If they had to look at that, I have my fingerprints. I was there. Why they didn't just do that instead of me going back to KZN? And even the process of unblocking my children's ID, it takes time. It took them a very long time to while they unblock my ID, why they didn't just unblock my children's ID if it is easy like that, because now they found out that I am truly a South African citizen. Why they didn't just unblock my ID, my children's ID, instead of me going back to KZN in Eddington Hospital to ask those proof of birth from the hospital? Why they didn't just unblock my children's ID? Why I had to suffer in this way? I feel like I could see him and ask him this question in person, because I feel like I'm a bit furious about his response, because he is not thinking about South Africans. As he is there, he is like everything. You don't think about us suffering down there. We are suffering. We need jobs. We need this. We need to start our own businesses. We need children. They need to persuade their career. Why you see, the way I am talking now is not the same as before, when I was explaining. Yes, I when I think of whatever happened to me, I become so emotional. But at this time, I have mixed emotions because of his response. Really, I need him to think again before he respond to public like this. To him, it seems very easy to unblock IDs. Like, really, I don't find him truthful when he is saying he managed to unblock 1.8 million while they failed to unblock my ID in 5 years' time.
Thandeka highlights substantial information presented during the litigation, underscoring the Department of Home Affairs' disregard for the law and the people affected by the ID blocking practice.
So to contextualize this interview, it came a few days after the court hearing, which also means that it came after we had initiated this case already in December 2022, and after the department had an opportunity to look at the court papers to see the case that we have brought against them and to answer to those court papers. And I think that context is important because what we have flagged with the department since 2020, when we began to write letters to them explaining that there is a problem. We have picked up a problem and we are coming to you, Department of Home Affairs, to assist these people who are suffering. We said what we are hearing, the stories we are hearing to us reflect contempt of processes. Because there's no due process that is being followed. This ID blocking is happening very arbitrarily, in a very ad hoc manner. In some of the cases, we are seeing these disturbing elements where people's IDs are blocked due to suspicion, due to discriminatory facts, not based on any sort of substantiated reason. We said that it reflects a contempt of people, because the people who are coming to Lawyers for Human Rights are suffering. Not just on an individual level, but their families are suffering. There are children behind these cases that we're telling you about that are also impacted by the actions of the department. Contempt of people, contempt of processes. This is what we have said repeated times to the Department of Home Affairs, up to the point where we had to turn to the courts for help. The people had to turn to the courts for help simply because no one in the department was coming to their assistance. And it's demonstrated even in the minister's response. There is still a contempt of processes. You come and you concede, you agree to the fact that this action is unlawful, but you say it is necessary, it is rational. Something that is illegal is necessary and rational. You come and you say there is no suffering. We do not understand what suffering the organizations are talking about in this court case. We have put forward stories of 134 individuals and their families. We have described the level of suffering, to be quite clear, that these people have gone through. If the minister was just to look at one single case, even Thulisiwe's case, and track it from the beginning in 2017 when the ID was blocked, to February 2022 when the ID was unblocked, February 2023, when her children's IDs were finally unblocked, he would see the suffering that we are talking about. The fact that when people do present themselves to the Department of Home Affairs, South Africans come to the Department of Home Affairs for assistance. They do not get it. They knock on every single door. They go to lawyers. Even the lawyers do not get responses from the Department of Home Affairs. And that, it's contempt of people and processes. It's simply a complete disregard of the impact of the department's actions on South Africans. There's no accountability, it's very disappointing to hear that there's no accountability. Even when you can reflect and say it was unlawful, we have since unblocked 1.8 million. And then to hide behind the banks and say these 700,000 will remain blocked because it will cost South Africa billions of rand. But what about the cost on human lives? Right? The 2.5 million in totality, plus their children and their families. What about the cost in their lives? How do we quantify the lost years? Thulisiwe's ID had been blocked for 5 years. We listened to all the opportunities she missed individually as a person who had worked hard to bring herself to Johannesburg, to start a job, to want to build her mother a house, buy a house for her family. How do we quantify the years lost for her children? Lungani lost 8 years without an ID. In his most productive years as a young person, he had dreams to pursue that were almost dashed because of the Department of Home Affairs. And so for me, this cost of billions of rand has nothing to do with how you have ruined people's lives simply because you refuse to abide by the rule of law. And there's a reason why the law exists. especially in the context of South Africa, and not once again to continue referencing apartheid, but there's a reason why we came to this point where we have a constitution that is redressing to say never again. But the irony is now under democratic South Africa, the same demographic, Black South Africans, marginalized South Africans who suffered for decades under apartheid are suffering now at the hands of a democratic government. And that is really something to answer to, and something that the minister should reflect on. Yes, he might not know at the level of an executive the day-to-day happenings in the local offices, but this issue should have been something to flag to him to say, listen, we need to find out what's happening at the local level. It cannot be that 134 people that Lawyers for Human Rights has told us are suffering are not suffering. There's something to that case, and we have produced evidence.
Liesl points out the minister's lack of awareness of the chaos and administrative turmoil within his local offices, emphasizing the risks associated with relying on suspicion to execute administrative decisions.
Honestly, my first response is that, as Thulisiwe says, it is incredibly infuriating to hear the minister talk with so much confidence of something which he clearly has no personal experience of or is clearly misinformed. Those of us who've been doing this work for the last decade know that you have clients coming to you daily with cases that are truly South African citizens. And we know that there are clients. My very first client who came to me at a human rights organization where I started my work was a blocked ID client. And by the time I moved from that organization, I'd have 50. And I was only able to resolve very few of them because at some point there was somebody in the department who I could email directly. But there was no process from the local office. So, I mean, I think the minister is misinformed and is being very arrogant about something that really affects people's lives very seriously. Now, another thing that I want to highlight from what he said is he says, if you come across a person who is clearly a foreigner, now let us pause there. How do you decide if somebody is clearly a foreigner? Okay. Is it if they are very dark? Is it if their surname is Moyo because their father is Moyo and their mother is South African? Or how do we decide these things? Is it what we are saying is that Home Affairs is using their own bias. Okay. And the law in South Africa, which tells us who is a citizen, is the Citizenship Act. It's not on how you look, how you sound. There is a law that says you are a citizen if one of your parents is a citizen. Doesn't matter if they are married, not married, whether one is South African, whether the father is foreign, it doesn't matter. If you have one parent who is South African, you are South African. Now, the reason why I say that is because if that is very clear, it doesn't matter if your uncle is Zimbabwean or your brother has another father, so he's Mozambican. It doesn't matter. You just have to interpret the law. Now, in this court case, the Department of Home Affairs, under oath in an affidavit, swears to a section in the paper saying this is how citizenship works. And then they refer to acts which are no longer even in working at the moment. They refer even to the wrong legislation. And that affidavit is signed by the Director General of Home Affairs. Now, Tal, I ask you, if the Director General cannot even understand the law, how is anybody else in the department supposed to understand the law and then know that somebody is clearly a foreigner? They will use their own racism, their own bias, and that is just unacceptable.
Lastly, Lithalethemba cautions against the blanket approach advocated by Home Affairs, emphasizing how this procedure places unnecessary burden on both clients and lawyers.
We have paying members, and it further illustrates this problem that even when you have a lawyer, you don't get any resolution. One of our clients is a principal who's supposed to be retiring in a year, but she's been pushing her retirement because she doesn't know what's going to happen. Part of the money in those banks is people's investments that they cannot access because their IDs are blocked. So to kind of use a blanket approach is very unfortunate because the lived experience, for example, is Umam Thulisiwe has said she had to travel to KZN to go get documents to come to head office because if I go to the Home Affairs in my town, they say, we don't know what's happening. Somebody at head office knows. You keep coming there. You keep coming there. They say it's at head office. People are traveling this country. People are coming as far as Port Elizabeth
to come to Home Affairs in Pretoria head office to find out what's happening because they're not getting the answer at the ground. And that is part of the issue, is that you should not need lawyers for this. This is an admin issue. Me getting a birth certificate, I should not need to sue someone to get a birth certificate. If I need to go to hospital, I don't need to start with the lawyer and say, hey, I need immunization at the hospital. If I need to go to SASSA for a grant, I should not go to a lawyer to say, hey, I need to go to SASSA. This is admin. This is a part of life. And we're not saying that Home Affairs should not have systems in place, but those systems have to be based in law and according to the Constitution. That is why we went to court, because only a court can then hold the department accountable. That is why we have the division of powers, to make sure that we don't have people working with unfettered power. The Constitution is what we measure all of our behaviors. Well, whether you're a government, whether you're a human being, we measure it against the Constitution. So now when your conduct is unconstitutional, not based in law, against multiple constitutional rights, it's unconstitutional. You cannot continue to do that.
The Department of Home Affairs has perpetrated a deeply flawed practice of blocking IDs, subjecting countless South Africans to prolonged suffering. The lack of accountability for the significant effects on individuals and families amplify the urgency for reform. According to the law, the Department of Home Affairs can investigate instances of fraud or irregular immigration through a fair and transparent process. This involves notifying the individual, providing an opportunity to present information, stating the legal basis for the investigation, justifying the necessity, ensuring a timely process, offering written reasons for decisions, implementing an internal appeal process, and allowing for a legal review. Violating these principles renders ID blocking unconstitutional, emphasizing the importance of law and just administrative actions. Litigation against them, challenging the constitutionality of ID blocking, is a stark reminder of the department's failure to uphold the rights and dignity of citizens.
The Department of Home Affairs has come to a point where it operates more as a department of suspicion. They have forgotten that they need to be a department of service. They are not serving South African people. They're not serving the public by what they are doing. And they need to go back to even Batopele principles, say transparency, accountability, assist people. If something is wrong with the document, assist them. Don't turn them away and then treat them as if they're rubbish. Assist them. Serve the people. Do not rest until you solve a case of someone who's undocumented. Even if the decision at the end of the day is, listen, in fact, this is not a document you're entitled to. The one you're entitled to is XYZ, and this is what you need to do to get that document. And I think that is really the crux of the problem. The other thing is that I think us as a society, we need to call our leaders to account. So this issue that is happening at the Department of Home Affairs, it's not just simply a problem of refugees. It's not a problem of foreigners or migrants. The whole department is in a state of collapse because nothing is working. People apply for visas, they do not come out. Refugees queue at refugee reception offices, they do not get assistance. South Africans struggle with birth certificates and ID. So we need to be real about what the problem is in South Africa. It's not foreigners. It is the state that is failing the people.
We are now waiting for the final judgment following our court appearance. However, the imperative remains to continue advocating for our clients. This gave rise to the concept of the Unblock My ID, Unlock My Life campaign.
So the Unblock My ID, Unlock My Life campaign is one of those efforts to drive awareness around this issue of ID blocking. There is a common misconception that ID blocking is to do with foreigners. It's an issue around fraud and illegal immigrants. But in fact, it's an issue that is directly related to South African citizens who are being deprived or stripped of their citizenship due to invalidated identity documents, especially in the majority of cases where we have seen that the supposed reason or the message given along with the decision to block your ID is because you have been traced as a citizen of X country. And so the Department of Home Affairs is communicating to those people that we don't recognize you as South African. So we're trying to raise awareness to show how this issue is something that impacts South Africans. It's an issue for the general public to be more vigilant about, because it's always concerning when you have a department or state department that is acting, with unwielded powers, unfettered discretion, and not abiding by what the Constitution or our laws say. It is also to amplify the voices of the hundreds and thousands of people who are impacted by this issue of ID blocking, to hear directly from them how they came to be blocked, how their IDs came to be blocked, and what it has meant for their lives. And this is where the name of the campaign comes from: Unblock My ID, Unlock My Life. It's related to one client who sent me an email with that subject matter to say, no ID, no life. And in that short phrase, he was trying to express the pain of not having an ID and how it essentially means your life is meaningless. And we're also just calling for support from the public to support these poor people who've gone through this experience, to call for justice and accountability from the Department of Home Affairs.
As we bring this episode to a close, we encourage you to engage with the Unblock My ID, Unlock My Life campaign. Explore our social media platforms, where we share the stories of numerous clients affected by ID blocking, and dive deeper into the issues through this podcast and an upcoming documentary. We believe these narratives will underscore the pressing need for accountability and justice. Now let's turn to Thandeka, Lithalethemba, Liesl, and Thulisiwe for the final comments on this critical matter.
My final comment or remark is firstly to thank Thulisiwe and all our other LHR clients who have come on this platform and been brave enough to share their stories, who have had to listen to the kind of backlash they have received from the Department of Home Affairs or the minister's remarks that try to undermine or downplay what they've experienced, and who have remained resilient in fighting for justice and for their rights. I think it's very important to have that one person who's brave enough to stand up and speak out, knowing the stigma attached to issues of documentation, knowing the kind of discrimination that comes with being labeled an illegal immigrant, because we do live in a xenophobic society, and that backlash is very real, and I'm sure they've shared that in their stories. I do not think in this 30 minutes or 2 hours one person can sit down and tell you just the level of pain they've gone through due to the blocked ID, and to have to relive that and tell that story. So I'd just like to acknowledge all the individuals, Thulisiwe, for coming here and sharing that story for awareness raising. My last word is once again to the Department of Home Affairs to say, let's see how we can work together. It's not civil society against the Department of Home Affairs. It is us as a South African society working together with our government for the benefit of society. Human rights are very important, and we are only here for checks and balances, not to try and catch out the department. We're here to be a voice to the voiceless and to bring us closer to a place where we can work together so that these issues don't actually persist.
A lot of people have blocked IDs, but they actually don't know that their issues are stemming from that. So through this case and through talking about it and informing the public what it actually means to have a blocked or a marked ID, they now know that they can go to Home Affairs since this case has started. But if that is not working, they can reach out to different organizations for assistance.
Final thought that I would like to make loud and clear is that we have to treat children as full human beings. They are not just possessions of parents. We need to give them their individual rights and treat them as full human beings, because they are.
The first message will go to South Africans to stand up for their rights and fight for what belongs to them. The other message I'll send to the Home Affairs minister and the workers to take their work seriously. They block our ID they block our life. There is no movement. You have nothing to do without an ID. I wish the minister can be blocked, can have a blocked ID for 2 days and see how he can survive within these 2 days. Just for 2 days. That's my message.
As you wrap up the Unblock My ID, Unlock My Life podcast series, it's crucial to revisit our journey, beginning with the first episode where we delved into the historical context of ID blocking. This praxis, with its roots in apartheid laws targeting Black South Africans, persists today, casting a shadow on the lives of Phineas, George, and many others. In the second episode, we explored the tangible effects of ID blocking, witnessing the struggles of individuals like David, Andries, and Ananias, and how this bureaucratic process affects families. Finally, the disrupted dreams of Thulisiwe and her family are not just personal. They extend to the dreams of building a better South Africa, one free from systemic injustices. The urgency for a call to justice reverberates through the stories we've shared. It's a call to dismantle a system that not only blocks IDs, but obstructs the path to a brighter future. We must educate ourselves and others about the intricacies of ID blocking, amplify the voices of those affected, and demand justice from the Department of Home Affairs. Collaboration is key, as we must unite to bring an end to this discriminatory and damaging practice. Let our collective efforts unlock lives, restore dignity, and pave the way for a more just and equitable South Africa.
This is something that can indeed happen to anyone. And if you are someone with a blocked ID who has not sought help before, feel free to reach out to Lawyers for Human Rights and to do something about this problem of your blocked ID. Unblock my ID, unlock my life.